some level, I'm like, wow, the future is already here. You're talking about real-time diagnostics. You're talking about implications around medtech and drug discovery, and you of course have talked about the engineering, mathematical approach to biology. And I think this is really, really interesting. If we take the point that the industry is right now readjusting to the consumer being in the center, right? And maybe I'll turn over to Kate, because you talked about lots of data, new types of diagnostics, so on and so forth. How are you seeing this play out in each one of your worlds? And what do you expect the value to be down the road?
Yeah, I actually think there is still, I would say, ultimately a lot of unknowns and open.
Was the case, the administrators were more powerful, and their view is, okay, their goals are, how do I deliver the same level of care at a lower cost? So for us today, it's not about how can you incrementally
Is the value capture changing? I mean, you laid out robotic surgery, the changing nature of who's the customer. You've already laid that out. So is that driving some changes in the way you are capturing value?
Yeah, in our space, and I know what's front and center for me is it's almost like the hospital and the physician and the tension that we're seeing in that space. So physicians, as you started the conversation where was like the center, and most physicians started losing power, and over the last decade, most cardiology groups were actually acquired by hospitals. And the hospitals basically went in and said, well, we'll buy you and you become an employee of the hospital. And if you don't let us buy you, we're going to revoke you.
Potentially all the way to the patient or the consumer. And that's a very interesting discussion between consumer and patient. Because the consumer is still not sick, the patient is. And then thirdly, I think Mike, you, Lynn, you really very clearly called out the acquisition and the unlocking of high quality data, right? So as I was thinking about, just hearing about you, I was like, wow, this is, those litmus tests would be my test to identify which models would be successful across diagnostic, across medtech, across pharma, across drug discovery. Fascinating. So to get to, I want to keep moving on. So, just to go to the next topic. As we talk about, you've very eloquently laid out the changes that are happening in the industry, and you pointed out about cardiologists, these legacy systems, how they have changed. We've talked about fragmentation, so across the life sciences healthcare space, there's a huge fragmentation. And COVID, post-COVID, we are definitely seeing a little bit of industry reassembly. I think you're talking about, okay, so the hospital administrator, should I talk to the FDA on this front? Should I do something different from a drug discovery perspective, from a diagnostic perspective? What are the different business models, data, connected devices? I mean, that's where the reassembly is happening. So at one level, I think we are somewhere between this fragmentation and this reassembly space. And then, Mike, you've actually really clearly called out the age of biology, right? This is the entire personalized medicine space. Lynn, you've talked about a little bit about the assembly piece too. So how is this convergence? As we move from this fragmentation to this reassembly, how are each one of your industries changing internally? Or how are you structuring so that you're positioned for success in the future? So maybe I'll start with Lynn.
I mean, the first thing that jumps to my mind, I guess, is that I don't think innovation happens in giant leaps. So it's just the step-by-step approach. So I think it's that, for me, just in the last couple of years, as I was talking about with patients, the fact that patients are starting to now want to be kind of engaging directly and understanding the clinical research, clinical trials, how do I participate? It tells me that I need to continue to kind of do a better job of focusing on that part of my business and understanding it and serving it. I'm sure that as soon as I start serving it, something else is gonna change in the external environment, such that I'm gonna have to innovate again. So I mean, I guess my fundamental belief here is that the best we can do is just try to keep our eyes open and ears open and keep sensing what's happening and adjust as we go and learn. But I don't know that we can get from 0 to 60 in one fell swoop, because I'm sure that if I tried to, something else would happen to completely disrupt that ability. So, I don't know, that's my first thought.
And I think a big part of what you talked about at the beginning is kind of gradual education of consumer, like slash patient, in that sense, like the person who's actually receiving care or requesting care or whatever, needs to continue to develop, right? And it takes time, but it's interesting how it does develop. First, it's interesting to hear that, seeing people really being much more kind of tuned in, and we saw it even over the years, right? First, you mentioned like Google happened, all of a sudden now everybody can Google a symptom, and all of a sudden become a semi-doctor. Then sequencing revolution happened, then one way or the other through popular press, people found out what DNA is and started incorporating that into these sentences, right? And talking about